what causes the difference between Oir Makif and Oir Pnimi, and what are the differences. So here, this Maimon, the Rebbe Nishma Seiden, Baal Yem Yoledes, explains the difference, the Yesod of the difference. Usually when we talk about Seviv and Mamale, so we think of it in terms of Seviv is the Oir Nisaf HaBrigvul, and a chelik of that Oir, which is the Kav, is an Oir Mitzumtzum, and that's Mamale. So it sounds like Ki'ilu that Mamale is an offshoot of Seviv. It's just Mitzumtzum, we went through the Tzimtzum. That is generally what it sounds like. But in this Hemshech, Bipratius, the Rebbe Nishma Seiden is out to explain that in Inyan, the two Madregas of Seviv and Mamala attack two different types of Oir. I'll use some of the expressions it says elsewhere and earlier in the Hemshech, and we'll see it again soon inside the Maimon itself. There's two different types of Oir. There's an Oir, for example, Oir Haner, which in Yonai is Lahoya. He's made to shine. Oir Laba'asa, Boitkinas Achometz, La'oir Haner. It's made to go into corners and to look for things. There's another type of Oir, which it says, for example, it says in the passage which he brings later, Lagabi something else. There's a passage which says, Chachmas Adam To'i Ponov. So, let me ask a question. So maybe you can be two b'dikas chametz if you're a chacham without a ner. To'i Ponov. Now, kamuv in To'i Ponov doesn't mamish mean begashmius. Hagam, maybe it is begashmius. To me, it seemed once, Chagav, interesting that Simchas Torah, I was once very close to the line where the Rebbe was coming down from the bima to the middle, and to me it looked as if there was an extra light turned on. It was shining. But I'll go upon him. Yeah? The Tzohav Upanov. That's more of a smile, but it's the same idea, yeah. So Chachma Salam Toy Panov, everybody understands you can't be Beidik Chamas with such an oil. Favas Takanisht. It's a different type of oil. So what is the definition of this oil? The definition of this oil is not Lahoir, which is Misyachas to Azulas, like Shefa. This type of oil is Gilui Ha'etzem. He's not going anywhere. He's just telling you, like for example, Tzal V'Ponav, he's telling you that he's enjoying his seichel, or he's a big chacham, and therefore it's shine for them. You see that he's a chacham. But is that going to anyone else? Can you be Vedic chamas? Obviously not, because it's not made to shine to some other place. What would that be in Keichas HaNefesh, a dugma of these two types of Oir HaNefesh? An Oir which is in Yonei Lahoir, and an Oir which is Gilui Ha'etzem. That's where he brings in the brackets on the next page, Havonas Inyan, based on a Chatokas HaMaitik. I'm not quite sure what that means, but there's a shtickle there where he brings a moshel. What's the moshel? Rotzen and Seichel. What's the difference between Rotzen and Seichel? So he says like this: Rotzen is Hisgalas HaNefesh, and Seichel is, how does he word it? It's not that the etzem is megala oil, but it's sorry. Shaha'atzmus megala oil lo shaha'oil hu mitzias dava bifnei atzmai. What is rotzen? Rotzen is a hashpah to someone. What is rotzen? Rotzen means it's like the toy ponov of the chacham. It's a hisgalus of his etzem. So he's saying ani roitzer, so it's a hisgalus of ani. That's why I say nefesh is a word that's used when we want to express ratzon. Nafshi esa means I want. Nafshi visicha. The inyan of ratzon is expressed by the word nefesh. Why? Because it is a bitui of nefesh. It's an expression of nefesh. Whereas seichel is not pshat that it's not from. It's also part of the nefesh, but it's not a bitui of the etzema nefesh. It's one of the, to use an expression the Frierdiker Rebbe uses in one of the Maamarim, it's one of the Eivari HaNefesh. It's one of the tools, or the hands and feet, so to speak, of the Nefesh. How does the Nefesh get to this Seichel, to this Havana in this, what it says in this Sefer? So he has a koyach, as a tool called Seichel, and with that he goes to the Seichel. So it comes out that there's two types of Giluim from the Nefesh. there's a nefesh, there's a part of the nefesh which is gilui ha'etzem, I want, that you can't give over to anybody else. It's not a type of oil which you can be mashpir to another person. Just like toy ponov, you can't be by the chums with that. It doesn't go anywhere. It's a gilui of the etzem. So the ratzon is a gilui of the etzem, whereas seichel is not a gilui of the etzem. Seichel is a koyach which is made to go somewhere. That's why, for example, seichel you can give over to somebody else. Ratzon you can't give over to somebody else. You can explain a svara to somebody else, and he'll get it. It may be tomorrow that you've decided that's not right, but the other guy understands this svara. Whether you're there or not, the svara remains by the zulas, by the other person. Whereas ratzon you can't give to somebody else. You can tell the other person that you have a ratzon. You can be ma'or the other person that he should also be nisayre b'ratzon. But your ratzon you can't give over to somebody else, because what does ratzon mean? Ani roitza. The ani roitza I can't give over to somebody else, because you are you and he is he. In other words, ratzon is meshubed. Kol inyana is gilui ha'etzim. Mashenkin seichel is ki'ilu a metzias bifnei atzmai, which comes from the nefesh, obviously. The Eibishter was mechaber the nefesh with 10 koiches, so it comes from the nefesh, but it's a separate inyan. It's not gilui hanefesh. It's a hamshacha from the nefesh. It's a gevisa metzias, and the lashon over here is that the ratzon is atzmus is megala. His galas atzmus haratzon who is galas atzmus hanefesh, whereas koyach haseichel he says is that the seichel is an inyan bifnei atzmai. Where's the lashon over here? I'll just use the lashon in that brackets over there. Page terav. Havonas in ratzon seichel haseichel lo oir hanimshech u'mizgala min hanefesh lo hisgalas hanefesh. Ratzon is not his ratzon is his galas hanefesh, and seichel is a koyach. It's a gilui from the nefesh, which is al derech, like we know b'derech klal, the difference between oir and shefa, which he said anyway in the beginning. That's al derech moshel. That just like what's the difference between oir and shefa? Oir is gilui, not going anywhere. It's just megala where it's coming from, and shefa means you're being mashpir to somebody else. So in keiches hanefesh, that's ratzon and seichel. The same thing, al derech zeyuvin lamayla. The same thing is a chili between seviv and mamala. Seviv is a gilui oir, which in yoni is where it comes from originally. What is the inyan of seviv? It's a gilui of atzmus. It's a gilui oir which ein in yoni lahoyer. It's that atzmus is an unofen of his of gilui. It's not going anywhere. It's the etzem, the toyepon of kaviyachal of atzmus. So you understand that if what's going to come out from that, even if we're somehow able to be mamshich this oil, which is gilui ha'etzem, if we were somehow able to be mamshich the toyepon of from this chacham, it would never be an oil which is mislabish in a keli. It would always be an expression of that oil which is gilui ha'etzem. Which means that even when you take this oil and you take it after the tzimtzum, it's always going to remain makif. It's never going to be mislabish, because it originates from an oil which in Yona is gilui ha'etzem, not lahoy to azulas. So since that's kol muhusay, so wherever he's going to go, he's always going to remain aloof. He's going to remain makif and above the place, because he's not made to measure to be mislabish in the zulas. Mashein ken the oil which in Yona is lahoy al derech oir haner, while derech keiach haseichel is in Yona is lahoy. So adarabah, when he gets down to kelim, he will be mislabish in kelim, and he'll become a chayis primi. So now let's see if we can read a little bit inside, and we'll get to another point which he says in a second. Reish mem gimel. Biyo ha'inyan. Yesh lahoven inyan ha'imakav ha'ipnimi b'tchilas hamshachosam min ha'atzmus. You see, he's going back to the very beginning. B'tchilas hamshachosam min ha'atzmus. Meaning that both mal and both sovev come from atzmus. The shaila is in what way? What's their tchilas hamshachosam? Then you do the ha'imakav ha'klolis in yone einu lahoyes ha'ilumos ki imu b'chilas gilu min ha'etzem. What does it mean gilu min ha'etzem? Like we gave the marshal. Toi ponov, he's not going anywhere. The kach all the britzanis parach legalas oimin ha'atzmus lefi oifen ha'etzem loy lifol dava ki brak legalas oimin ha'atzmus. He bavoren so bavadi yesh beze kavona li yesh shezehu gilu ritzayni Aval inyan gilui hazeh ein liful ezadav. What's he bavaroning over here? If you're saying that gilui, the gilui of the oil, which is the oil which is gilui ha'etzem, is not going anywhere. It's just his galus, just like chochmas adam toy ponov or tzov uponov. It's like an automatic his galus is not made to be mashpia. So you might come up with the idea, okay, so things work automatically up there. Oil is b'derech memela, and there's actually no kavon in this oil. It's just gilui ha'etzem. The Eibishter allowed himself to be in his gala, toy ponov. And that's it. It's not going anywhere, but the oil is automatic. So he says, no, bavada yesh b'zeh kavana. The Eibishter doesn't have to have this oil, which is gilu ha'etzem. Avada, this oil, is also for a kavana. And he explained earlier in the Maamarim of Shavuos and Ayin Gimel why we need this oil. But so this because it's gilu ritzoni, because every oil is only b'ritzona. He doesn't have to shine oil. It's not like a person that if he has tzov upon of automatically, or he has toy upon of, it's automatic. The Maila, there's no automatic, so it's Gilu Ritzoni. Aval inyan Gilu is en elifel eze dovarak legalis oil levad. They wanted to be, it should be Gilu oil. Va'oil ze eine klal bebeginnes yiridim in ha'atzmus. Okay, so that's a klolos achiri. Now he's going with protius lifnei atzimtzum, which is also something which is a little bit of explanation. Dehine yidua, the hoil shel lifnei atzimtzum, klolos ha'oil hu bebeginnes oil ha'kolol ba'atzmusay. When we say Ko'era Kolomb Atzmus, what do we mean? When we say Atzmus, what do we mean? Usually when we say Atzmus, we mean Atzmus, right? Atzmus Ein Sof. Atzmus Habeira. That is Biprotius. Bichlolis, when we say Atzmus, or when we say Kolomb Atzmus, we mean anything that's L'mayla Min Atzimtzum. The Oir in Sof, which is L'mayla Min Atzimtzum, is called Oir HaKolomb Atzmus. Either there's Oir there, V'haraya, the tzimtzum, we know it was only in oil. The tzimtzum was in the oil, shalifnei tzimtzum. The tzimtzum was in that oil. There was the skalos of oil, and then there was the tzimtzum. There's no chas v'shalom tzimtzum in atzmos. And a chanami. That's if we're going to be pratis. Avada, lifnei tzimtzum, you're going to have atzmos umahuz, and then you have kama madregas in oil and sof. And then comes the tzimtzum. But bichlol is standing from down here, looking upwards, we say, L'mayla min atzimtzum, that's atzmus. Why? Because the oil is kolomb atzmus. Why is it kolomb atzmus if there's a mitzias of oil? Why is it called kolomb atzmus? Lifnei atzimtzum. Yeah, it's on lifnei atzimtzum. Why is it called oil hakolomb atzmus? Why we should even by even kloli call it oil hakolomb atzmus? And the answer is, it's explained elsewhere, that the answer is because in order to be a mitzias oil, there has to be a certain type of yitzia from its mocker, that it should be nirgish, that it went out from its mocker somewhere else. And then it becomes a mitzias of oil. The oil in Sof Shlifnei Tzimtzum, wherever it's being mispashed, this oil, it's always nirgish in the oil, his mocker. He doesn't feel he's gone anywhere. And therefore, it's nirgish that he's still kolomb atzmusay. There's taka mitzias of oil. But the mitzias of oil is in an ofen of bittul, that it's nirgish, that wherever he goes, Atzmus is with him. Just to use an example, the Rebbe likes to look for examples in Nigla if possible. So let's think of an example. You can have a spashtus, something going somewhere, and yet it's nirgash that it's kolomb atzmus. It doesn't feel like it's gone anywhere. So it's possible, perhaps, to give a mashal in halacha. We have in Rambam. There's a din that if you have to return, let's say you borrowed something, you have to return it, and the person who you have to return it to agrees that you can send it with a shliach. Now, in the middle of the trip, something happens. Who's responsible for the keli? He agreed that I should send it with this guy, so it's out of my hands. I sent it back. And the guy tripped over, smashed it, whatever it was. But he agreed to it. I'm not mechuyev to pay. What happens if that person, which he agreed to, is my servant, is my eved? As an afkamina, if he's an eved ivra, an eved kanani. But if he's an eved kanani, which gufa is konui, he doesn't belong to himself, he belongs to me. So even if he's gone and he's almost there, he's still bottle to the odding. So therefore, if anything happens, it's still in my reshus. But it went out of my reshus. Physically, it went out of your reshus. But in Indian, it never left you because he's going nowhere. He's kolol batzmusa. He's part of you. He's a hemshech of your mitzias. Al derech ze yuvan inyaneinu. The Oren Sof is mispashit. Yeah, of course it's mispashit. There's Oren Sof lifnat tzimtzum. There's Kamadargis and Oren Sof lifnat tzimtzum. And he's going to mention them in a second. And we even call one of those dargis Atzilus Dechlolis, which we're going to see in a second. Atzilus, the whole musig of Atzilus means it's taka going outwards. Yeah, all these things are correct, but lifnat tzimtzum, it's nirgash that it's bottled to the mocker. It's not nirgash as a mitzias of oil. What does the tzimtzum do? The tzimtzum extracts the oil and makes it into mitzias of oil. Ad kadei kachta, in other places it says, in Kotetera it says, that when the kav comes down after the tzimtzum, it's called yesh mi'ayin. Who ever heard of saying on the oil kav is yesh mi'ayin? The Alter Rebbe says so in the Kotetera. What's the yesh mi'ayin? Not yesh chas v'shalom, hargosh is a yesh. It's nirgash that there's a mitzias of oil. Al derech, like we just had in the Moshul, it's not the rotzen hanefesh, which is an expression of nefesh. There's a mitzias of seichel. It's your koyach ha-seichel, you're the one that's understanding. Yeah, but it's a mitzias. It's a mitzias of a koyach, which is ki'ilu outside, attached to the nefesh. It's a tool from the nefesh. It's not the nefesh itself. Whereas rotzen is an expression of the nefesh itself. Same thing, the kav has gone out and become a mitzias of oil. Mashenkin lifnat tzimtzum, every madrig of oil is bottled to the mocha in an oifen that it's not nirgish as a mitzias b'fnei atzmai. That's what he says over here. Dehina yedua, the ha'oil shlifnat tzimtzum kololos ha'oil v'chinas oil ha'kol ba'atzmusei. The ima yoshe b'ha'oil, k'moshu lifnat tzimtzum, yesh be'gam kein v'chinas etzem v'hispashtus. You do have madrigas. The hispashtus ha'oil hu v'chinas oil ha'shayach ha'oilamus. The ba'atzmusei gufa, in lifnat tzimtzum gufa. Hu bechinas oil hameh el hazulas. So it's a type of oil which seems to be yes meir to the zulas. It's like not toiponov. It's like oil haner, but it's supposed to be meir to the zulas. U'kamosh kosem v'kmacha bin kodesh kodesh v'kodesh. Kamosh u'beins of shrifnat tzimtzum the shneim heim b'ha'oil. Rak the kodesh hu bechinas etzem ha'oil. The hainu bechinas oil meir la'atzmai. V'kodesh hu bechinas hispashtus ha'oil. The batzmusa hu bechinas oil hamer el hazulas. So you see there is such a type of oil even if not tzimtzum. Michoel mokem klolos ha'oil eine bechinas yitziyah min ha'atzmus. It's all kol batzmusa. Even the mitzias of oil, which is lahoil el hazulas, is also kol batzmusa. And this is the difference taka between oil and atzilus. You do a hefresh between shem oil and shem atzilus. The lechoire man is chadish be'inyan ha'atzilus. Shar ha'atzilus hu bechinas ha'oil dafke. Liyois the chol inyan ha'atzilus hu bechinas dveikes b'mkoyle ha'atzilus loshen etzav l'somach. V'zeh shaykh b'ha'oilis dafke. Shehem bechinas dveikes b'mkoyle. Ma she'en ken ha'kelim en bechinas dveikes. The b'shum zeh ha'kelim en bechinas b'riyah sheba'atzilus. Let's skip a few lines. Ve'im kein man is chadish be'inyan ha'atzilus al inyan ha'oil. And this is where he goes and what Atzilus mean. The Atzilus hu bechinas hafroshes ha'ora min ha'maitzl. The whole musig of Atzilus is what happened over there where the Lashon Atzilus. What does it usually say? The Lashon comes from Moshe Rabbeinu. V'atzalti min haruach asher alecha v'samti alehem. So he says v'atzalti min haruach asher alecha. There's the oil of Moshe, and you want to put it on somebody else. You want to put it on this kenim, so you're going somewhere else. So that's an oil which is to Azulas. That's called Atzilus. So the whole musig of Atzilus is I'm going to take this oil and step down a level. What was the mice over there? Because Moshe Rabbeinu was asked by the Yidden that they want meat. And Moshe Rabbeinu said, Ma'ayni basa, he's too high to be mashpia meat. Aber als darf doch kommen from Moshe Rabbeinu, you have to have everything coming from the Nasi. So the Abisha said, we'll sort it out. We'll get the Ayin Skanim and we'll be mitzel the oil, your oil shel Moshe, onto the Ayin Skanim, and the Ayin Skanim will now also, now the Ayin Skanim were on a higher level than regular Nevi'im, because they had Ruchel Shel Moshe. That's why they were higher than regular Nevi'im. What's the raya that they are higher than regular Nevi'im? What's the Lashon of the Mishnah? Moshe Kibbutz was telling Messina, Shiur is Kainim Nevi'im. So you see, it's Kainim Nevi'im two different levels. And it says, all the Nevi'im, when it's Nabe B'Koi, when they said Nevuah, they said, Koyam Hashem, Moshe was Nisnabe, and he said Zeh. What were the Skanim? they were also nisnabe bezeh. But they want the madrega of Moshe. They had rucha shel Moshe, and that's why they were able to have this extra level of nevuah. So the Zkenim are higher than regular Nevi'im. But it's still one step down from Moshe. Therefore it's called Atzilus. So the whole musig of Atzilus is going outwards. Masha'enken, the musig of Oyer is not Atzilus. Oyer is Gilui HaMoyer, Gilui HaEtzem. That's what he says over here. V'im kein manis chadish be'inyan ha'atzilus al inyan ha'oyer, ach ha'inyan hu da'atzilus hu bechinas ha'froshes ha'ora min ha'maitzil dahainu bebechinas yerida v'yitzia min ha'atzmus kaviyachol. That's the main thing, that it's yerida and it's a yitzia. We're going to wake kaviyachol outside of atzmus. Shezeu alidei ha'tzimtzum dafka. Validei ze nasa ha'oyer bebechinas mitzias dova. There's a mitzias of oil. That's hashpa. The bezeh shenetzel mahamaitzel elyon nasa bebechinas mitzias oil. Aval klolos ha'oil shalifne atzimtzum nikra b'shem oil. Whereas, not atzilus. We're talking about lifne atzimtzum. We're not going to call that atzilus. We're going to call it oil. The hainu shekol b'atzmus yadayin. It's still kolol. The einu bebechinas mitzias oil. Now you can ask a question. Isn't there atzilus the where's atzilus the klolos? You know about the Oilimus Klolim? We're familiar with the Ishtalshalus of the Oilimus.
So Oil is before Tzimtzum or after Tzimtzum?
Oil is Lifnei Tzimtzum. That's what it's
But you say it's not Prinaseh.
Lifnei Tzimtzum is Oil. Lachar Tzimtzum is Atzilus.
But there is also between.
What do you mean in between? Where in between?
Ak.
So all those levels are outside Kaviyachol of Atzmus. Kaviyachol.
So
Because the Tzimtzum extracts them and makes them Mitzias of Oil. That's why I said even the Kav is referred to as Yeshmiai.
But this is also Oil.
I thought everything's called Oil. Up and down here, even down here we can say there's Oil. We're talking about in that difference that we're making between Oil and Atzilus, we're going to say that Lifnei Tzimtzum is Oil, Achar Tzimtzum is going to be called Atzilus.
Even Ak in Kudim.
Yeah. But if you want to go La'achra Tzimtzum Biprotius, we would say, let's say up until Keser would be Oil. Keser, all the Makifim are going to be the same. To remember, we're saying that oil is lifnei tzimtzum. We're also saying that anything that comes from that type of oil, which is gilui ha'etzem, is always going to remain makif. It's always going to remain saviv. So we could say on keser, the keser is also oil because it's an oil makif. Whereas atzilus is atzilus. It's an oil pnimi. It's oil bekalim. So in every oilam you're going to have. Truth is not just every oilam. Every sphere you have both things. That was early on in the Hemshech, which was not part of this. Thing that every sphere has in it also two things. It has the makif and the pnimi. It's called the Golomb v'yosher. That's just Kabbalistic terms. What it means is you have the makif and you have the pnimi. So everything has a keser. Everything has a keser. Everything has a pnimi. There's a Golomb v'yosher. All the igulim are misyachas to sovev, which is misyachas to the igul agadol, which is misyachas to the oil, which is legalis atzmusoi, toi panov kaviyachol. And all the oiris which are pnimium are misyachas to the shorish of oir pnimi, which is the oir lifnei tzimtzum, which is in yonoi lahoy. So where's Atzilus the Chlolos?
Don't we say sometimes before Tzimtzum?
Yes, we do. Not sometimes, all the time I think. Atzilus the Chlolos, for most times at least, is lifnei tzimtzum. Yeah, as I state in Kudatera. Atzilus the Chlolos is lifnei tzimtzum. What does it mean the Chlolos? If we split up the whole Seder Shtalshlus, but often Kloli will say that what we call Atzilus is Be'emerson, that's the end of Shtalshlus. You have the Oyin Saf Lifnei Tzimtzum, then you have the Tzimtzum Namshach Zakav, and then you have Ak, Hakudim, Nekudim, and then you come to Atzilus. Atzilus is the end of Shtalshlus. What happened after Atzilus? That's not Shtalshlus of Elokus, that's Nivroim. They're out the picture. That Shtalshlus of Elokus is up until the end of Atzilus. Machas the Atzilus is Seif Kol Dargin of Seder Shtalshlus of Elokus. What happened after that was created Nivroim. Of course, if there's Nivroim there, you have to have a continuation of the Oyer of Atzilus coming down, the Ha'ora coming down from a level to level because everything has to have chayas, and chayas elikiyah is only from Atzilus. So somehow there's a bekiyas hakav that comes down also to Olam Hasir, right down here. But the Seder Hishtalshus really finishes at the end of Atzilus. And that's why we say the Ha'aras HaKav stops at the end of Malchus. Doesn't go further. That, when it goes further, is not actually in Biyah, as it says also in this Hemshech, it's not in Biyah, it's in the Kalim of Atzilus which come down into Biyah. The Kalim of Atzilus, of Malchus da Atzilus, which is Oisis Hadibu. What is Malchus? Malchus is Olam Hadibu, Malchus Peh. So Malchus talks to whom? To Biyah. Biyah doesn't exist yet, but when he talks, he creates it. He creates it. So the Dibur creates Biyah. So the Oisis Hadiba are the Oisis of Malchus, the Kalim of Malchus. So the Kalim of Malchus come down, and in those Kalim, there's a Ha'ar of the Kav. So it ends up that the Kav is also coming down all the way to the end of Olam Asiyah. But it's all within the Kalim, which is inside the spheres. Okay, that's already another pilpul. We'll get into another time about exactly how the Kalim work. But the fact is that the Kav does not come down mitzad atzmai only up until Malchus Atzilus, because that's the end of Ishtalshlus. So therefore Atzilus in Olamas Hakloliyim, that means if we're taking the whole Seder Ishtalshlus into one big picture, Atzilus is going to be called Asiyah Dichlolis. From Klolis to Olamas, that's Olam HaAsiyah. What's Bria Dichlolis? Will be the first Olam which was Nishava after the Tzimtzum. Which Olam is that? Ak. Olam Kadmon. So Ak is Bria Dichlolis, Atzilus is Asiyah Dichlolis, and whatever is in between is called Yitzirah Dichlolis. So where's Atzilus Dichlolis? That's Lifnei Tzimtzum. Now, according to what we're saying, that everything Lifnei Tzimtzum is Oir HaKolol B'Atzmusai. It's all Oir, not Atzilus. Atzilus means it's Netzal outwards. Yerida v'Hamshach. And Yitzia Kaviyachal Min Ha'atzmus. So how can you have an Atzilus Dichlolis Lifnei Tzimtzum? So I think that's what he wants to. He answers in these brackets now. U'bechinas Atzilus Dichlolis Hu Oir and Sof Shalifnei Tzimtzum K'meshkos Mokemacha. Go to Torah. Zehu Mibnei Mibnei Shabbat Smusai Hu Bechinas Oir HaShayach L'Oilamus. What's the teretz? Basically, he's asking, how can you have an Atzilus Lifnei Tzimtzum? Everything Lifnei Tzimtzum is Oir HaKol Smusai. How do you get Atzilus up there? According to what we just said, that Atzilus means a Yitzia and a Yerida. How do you get an Atzilus up Lifnei Tzimtzum? So he says, because it's an Oir HaShayach L'Oilamus. What does that mean? If you're going to have an Atzilus down there, where does it begin? It begins inside. Al Derech Moshel, the famous Moshel of the Rav and Talmud, that the Rav has his own seichel which he learns for himself. That's the Oimik HaSeichel. Then he's decided he wants to tell something to the Ben Chomish Lemik. He wants to explain to Zulas, to somebody who's much less. But before he speaks to the other person, he has to prepare what he's going to say. You can't do Ben Chomish Lemikra if he's in the middle of a Tifa Inyan in Shas, and he has to give a Pirish Rashi Chumash, a Pirish Rashi Shir to a Ben Chumash. How's he going to go from there to there? So he has to come out of his. That's the whole moshel of the Tzimtzum Rishon. He has to come out of himself and be mechadish this whole new hashpah, which will be shaychus to the Talmud, who's Ben Chumash. But when does the Pirish HaPashat of Rashi appear? It appears when he starts talking, or beforehand, before when he started thinking about it. What is he going to say to the Talmud? He has to think beforehand. So there's a hachana of the oil that's b'shvil hamakabel, kolol within the Seichel HaRav. In his mind, he's prepared what he's going to say. So if that's the case, there is what's going to be Atzilus, kolol, in Lifnei Tzimtzum. Lifnei Tzimtzum has to be mashpia into the Olamus. And when it's mashpia into the Olamus, that's going to be called Atzilus. That's going to be called Hamshacha v'Yitzia min ha'atzmus, but it has to have a sheirish Lifnei Tzimtzum. So in other words, Lifnei Tzimtzum, there's a darga in oil, which in Yonah is lahoyer es ha'olamus, but it's just at the moment kolol. So at the moment, while it's kolol, it's together and mu'urev with the higher oil that's Lifnei Tzimtzum, and therefore it's all one big mayim b'mayim. It's all one big oil. But Biproteus, there's 3 levels. There's the Etzem oil, Nispashtus oil, and in Nispashtus Kufa there's two dargas. So the third darga is going to be the oil, which in Yoni is Lahoya, but it's at the moment Kolo Lifnei Tzimtzum. How is this oil called in Bosheligani? What does that level call it? That level of oil, which is in Yoni Lahoya, so oilemus, but it's still Lifnei Tzimtzum. Remember the first Bosheligani. But in the Lashon of Bosheligani, what does he call it? Can't hear. Yeah, it's the oil hashayach el oilemus, b'shvil oilemus. And what's the definition? Huh? What do you say? Yeah. Or better, b'diuk yosa, what does he call it? Ikeshchina. Ikeshchina. Because that's the ikka and the tak of the sheirish harishin of what will come later on in the life of shchina. Shchina meaning an oil which in Yonah is to be mislavish. Ikka miloshin sheirish. The Rebbe's lashon actually is ikku pnimius. That's sort of exactly what that means, but Akaponu, yes, it's the ikka because you have ikka and you have sheirish, and ikka seems to be a sheirish de sheirish. So it's the highest form. In other words, the highest form of oil, which in Yoni is lahoya, and to be mislabish and oilemus, where's the first beginning of that oil? Is lifnei hatzimtzum, when bechlolos everything's in an oifen of oil akol batzmusa, but still, that's what he says over here. Since it's shaykh la'olemus, doesn't mean it's be'erach to the olemus. It's shaykh la'olemus. Since it's shaykh to olemus, therefore it's going to be called ikeshchina, or it's going to be called over here atzilus techlolos. Just another few lines on the same topic. Even the dagas which are not just gilui, but also ispashtos, and seem to be shaykh to oilemus, at that point, lifnei tzimtzum, it's levadai. Kshem shto in sof lifnei tzimtzum hari ukol batzmusay k'may kein klolos ha'oir makif eine bebechinis yiridim min ha'atzmus shahari ha'oir makif ha'oir she'ene bebechinis tzimtzum. Now he's going back to the klolos ha'inyan that he was talking about. Just like we talk about the oir sof lifnei tzimtzum is what? It's an oir, and not an atzilus. And even the atzilus, the klolos is there, is called levadecho. It's all part of the oir. Is therefore al derech zeh all oir oiris makifim from Seder Shtalshlos have the same tchuna of oir and not atzilus. All pnimium will have the tchuna of shchina, atzilus, ispashtus, shaykh la'olemus, and all makifim will have a tchuna of gilei ha'etzem oir, not bebechinis yitzim atzmusay, his galas ha'etzem. And that's how the whole Seder Shtalshlos splits itself up into makif and pnimi, from those two inyanim lifnei tzimtzum. That's what he says. If you do the sheirish kol makifim him gila godos lifnei kav v'hainu shema oinsof shlifnei tzimtzum shenimshech shaloi al yedei tzimtzum. This is another inyan. Okay, so let's be makdim. So now let's ask a question. What makes the kav into a kav? That it should be an oir mitzumtzum. We say it has a sheirish lifnei tzimtzum. That's atzilus the klolos. That's esesvius agnuzis. That's the ikir shchina. The ispashtus hashayich el oilemus. Oir hashayich el oilemus. So if this can be called lifnei tzimtzum, what made it come into an oir hakav and oir mitzumtzum? The tzimtzum, obviously. The tzimtzum was mamshechit. You masalik the bligvul, and the oir hagvul comes out as an oir gvuli. What happens to the oil which is l'maylim izeh, the oil which is la'atzmoi, which is gilu ha'etzem? What happens to that oil? Is he also affected by the tzimtzum? Is he also affected by the tzimtzum? So he says over here, v'yidu d'sheirish kol ha'makifim heim ha'igel ha'gadol shlifnei ha'kav v'hainu sheheim ha'oirim sof shlifnei ha'tzimtzum shenimshach shaloi l'dei tzimtzum. What does it mean shenimshach? It's nimshach. It could be even nimshach after the tzimtzum, but it's loy al yedei tzimtzum. How does that work? Do we have this higher oil, which is gilu ha'etzem, coming also after the tzimtzum? There's somebody here. Do we have the oil, which is gilu la'atzmai, also nimshach after the tzimtzum? obviously we do, because we just said that all makifim come from this oil. This oil, which is la'atzmai, which is gilu ha'etzem, which is not lahoya, that's the shirish of Seviv. Seviv is nimshach after the tzimtzum or not? Yes, nimshach after the tzimtzum. All makifim are nimshach after the tzimtzum. All ksarim, all igulim. So that means that this oil, which is not even made lahoya sa'olamis, it's a gilu ha'etzem, is also nimshach lachar tzimtzum. How is it nimshach lachar tzimtzum?
What's the ground?
Well, if it goes through the tzimtzum, it should become gvul.
What's going through?
So it's going through. Is nimshach al yidei hatzimtzum. What does it mean it's going through? Looks good, but where are you taking it from? It's das atzmai.
It says nada, but it wasn't Slavish. Because it was
Good, very good, yeah. Let's see inside what he says. He says, "V'hainu shehem ha'in sof shlifnei hatzimtzum shenimshach sheloi al yidei hatzimtzum, v'atzeloi me she'ein hatzimtzum poel ba'oyer zeh, u'mekmoshkosim lo kimacher." They're trying to look at the Torah, but I don't think it's the right place to be assigned to. There's a whole arichas that the Rebbe has in I think it's Shavuos Beis. We used it on previous Maamarim. That just like you have in everything, you have hislapshus, bederach hislapshus, and bederach maive. Is in this oil also you have the same thing. You have an oil which is mislabish into the tzimtzum. That would be the oil pnimi. It becomes gvuli. And then you have oil which it's not mislabish in the tzimtzum. It's bederach maive. Maive is also a change in the oil to a certain extent. The very fact that we're saying it's nimshach after the tzimtzum means that it's going through, something's happening over there, but it's not mislabish in the tzimtzum. It's v'derech maive. Okay, it goes back to a few Yanovitz, but okay, I think we'll stop over there for now. Hmm? No, Maiva does. The rule of Maiva is that Maiva is changes, but not the etzem ha'inyan. What's the mashal of Maiva? Mashal. If you understand a svara, somebody tells you a svara in learning, and now you explain it to us, this svara. You're going to explain it on your words, the way you've understood it. Somebody else may understand it totally different. Bisham Beis Hillel had the same Rebbe, but Bisham understood everything as lachumra. He saw everything in dark glasses. And Beis Hillel said, no, he told us it's kosher, it's okay. They both heard the same svara, but it was mislabish in gvura and in chesed. But then there's something which comes through, which doesn't change. For example, if you have, let's say you're writing a seichel. That's the mashal is given. You're writing a seichel, so you take a pen and you start writing down this svara which you just learned. What happens when you write this svara? It's coming down on a piece of paper with a pen. Is it changing the svara or not? When you take this svara and you write it down on a piece of paper with a pen, is the svara changing? The svara is not changing. But there is some change, an external change. What's the external change? That it's becoming oisius gashmium. Beforehand it was oasis in your head, and now it's become oasis on a piece of paper. So that's called maiva. There's a change, but the change is only a chitzonistic change. You get that? Should I repeat it?
How does it affect Ayin?
Huh?
How do you say that in Ayin?
So oil haseviv also goes through the tzimtzum, but doesn't become mugbal. It doesn't go through the tzimtzum, but it's mislabish in the tzimtzum. It just is enough that it should come and become makif to the oilamus. Beforehand, it's makif, it's lamayla mi oilamus. It's legamri higher than oilamus. And now it's being seviv to the oilamus. That's why you have taka two pirushim in seviv. You have seviv kol almin, it's shaykhis to oilamus, but it's seviv. Or you could have seviv amiti. It's not seviv the almin, it's higher than almin. So you have makifim, which are the fact that the makif is shaykhis to gevisa inyan, even by official makif, means it's gone through a certain change. So this oil, this darga of oil, which is lifnei tzimtzum, which is la'atzmai, when it goes through the tzimtzum, it has a shaykhis to oilamus, but it's by official makif. But here he's not going into that bipratius. Okay.